Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here. And in X News, they are going through their first illegal content probe in history. Now, I think this is actually really interesting, and this is coming from Reuters, and here's what's going on. The EU is investigating social media company X over suspected breaches of obligations. Now, this is partly related to posts following Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th. And as I mentioned, this is the first probe under the new Digital Services Act in the European Union, or DSA. Now, the DSA came into force November of last year, so it's just over a year old, and requires large online platforms and search engines to do more to tackle illegal content and risks to public security. Now, the probe will focus on countering the dissemination of illegal content in the EU and the effectiveness of measures taken to combat information manipulation, including the quote-unquote community notes system, and this is according to basically the Commission. Now, if you didn't know, earlier this year, X, again formerly Twitter, launched its community notes feature, which allows users to comment on posts to flag false or misleading content, in effect crowdsourcing fact-checking to users rather than a dedicated team of fact-checkers. That obviously has a bit of a concern in the sense that if anybody can add to community notes and basically say, no, this is absolutely wrong, we didn't land on the moon, or whatever it is, you can understand how that's potentially poisoning the well. Now, as Facebook and Twitter, before Elon Musk, were kind of spinning these things up to combat disinformation and misinformation, there were groups of vetted people, not necessarily employees, but vetted people that went through and tried to, as objectively as possible, say yay or nay. Now, you may see something posted that you may completely agree with, and you may see a fact checker say, hey, this is actually false. There are going to be a lot of people out there, thanks to confirmation bias, that simply say, well, I don't believe the fact checker, I believe the article. And here's where we get into a bit of a problem. And so I think this is going to be something that they're going to get hit on. Now, the probe will also examine different aspects of the company's business, including the data access which X provides to researchers. Social media researchers have canceled, suspended, or changed more than 100 studies on X as a result of the actions taken by Elon Musk that limit access to the platform. Now, if you recall, I talked about this a while ago where they had open API access where researchers could go take a look, gather information. So we were starting to see basically near the beginning of Elon Musk's, I don't want to say term, but ownership of X, back then was called Twitter still, where we were seeing spikes in things like racist language, all those kinds of things. Researchers had access to basically query and search the massive platform that was Twitter, but he ramped up the charge to the API to something like $40,000 a use, which killed a lot of the researchers that are attached with low budgets out of universities and all that. If your entire grant is going simply to pay Twitter the privilege of hooking up to their API, how are you going to pay for the researchers, the assistants, and on and on and on? And I quote, the step that we are taking today does not find X guilty of an infringement or conclude that X has actually infringed the DSA, but merely states that we have significant ground to investigate these areas in detail, end quote. And that is from a senior EU official talking about the DSA. Now, X remains committed to complying with the DSA and cooperating with the regulatory process, according to their statement, basically sitting here today on December 18th. Quote, it is important that this process remains free of political influence and follows the law, end quote. And that is the crux of it. Because if you're looking at this from a purely American perspective, our standards for, let's say, vetting as well as free speech are different than those of Europe. We're democratic countries, or anocracies in some cases, but nevertheless, we have basically more free speech in some ways than some countries in the EU do. So, for example, Germany has essentially banned all references to Nazis for obvious reasons, whereas here the ACLU back in the 70s actually went to bat to allow neo-Nazis and the Klan, etc., to march in Skokie, Illinois, which is right next to Chicago and has a very large Jewish enclave. And so we have that freedom of speech, whether you like it or not. Freedom of speech, also for the record, does not mean freedom from consequences. But the other side of this coin here is the massive explosion in disinformation and misinformation coming out of intelligence communities. We have millions of people believing demonstrably false information because, as I mentioned before, it conforms to their confirmation bias. And how do we properly combat that? Here's the thing. The optics of a government or a group of governments or something like the EU, which is a group of governments of coming together in unity, basically saying we're a government and we are going to essentially step on this in some way, shape, or form, you're automatically going to have people that say, well, this is Big Brother stepping in because they don't want us to hear the truth. Now, that truth may be completely a lie. Maybe it is. I don't know. And they're saying that X isn't necessarily guilty, but what they're seeing is enough of this to essentially warrant an investigation. And I think that is going to be a big thing. So we're going to see where this goes. I don't think this is the first thing that we're going to see on X, but I can just say anecdotally for myself, as I've gone on to X, the algorithms have absolutely changed as I am being fed more politically charged information, data from people I don't follow, people I don't even know, but have like a zillion followers as they're yelling basically into the void, on Twitter or X or whatever they're going to call it next week. So I think this is an important thing to understand, but we're going to see where this happens. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I think this could go both ways. And to their point, and I would agree with X on this, this should not involve politics. Shouldn't matter what you believe, providing that we are all accurate. And I think that's one of the big problems we're just going to perpetually have, especially coming into large language models now generating and ramping up disinformation. It's going to be absolutely crazy with the AI. So there you go. That's your news, and we'll see what happens. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.